And so the fact that she doesn't hold it against him, she allows him to change, right? Because so often when people do us wrong, we don't allow them to change and we keep them in our mind as the bad person they were. So just the beauty of just like both of these character developments over the course of the story and then just their relationship was just so sweet and so beautiful. Hello, and thank you for joining me here today at Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations. My name is Laura, and today I am talking about The Color Purple. The new 2023 movie is directed by Blitz Bazawule, and it is based on the book by Alice Walker, which was released in 1982. And so Alice Walker, she had her book, which was then adapted in the 1980s. And then Marsha Norman wrote the Broadway musical, and it seems like she took the movie and turned the movie into a musical. Like in the original Broadway run, it went from 2005 to 2008. And I never saw this on Broadway, but from what I hear, this film adaptation of it is the same as the Broadway show. There is like one added song, which I know they do so that they can get nominated for an Oscar in part. And so yeah, this is the film version of the Broadway musical adaptation. And this is my second video for The Color Purple because earlier this year, I compared the book with the 1980s version directed by Steven Spielberg. And I will like reference the 80s movie here and there throughout this video, but if you want to hear more of my thoughts on that, I will link to that video so you can watch that. And in that video, I also go through the plot more like beat for beat, which I won't quite be doing here. I'm going to focus more on the characters and their relationships. But I do want to say that in that video, I was too harsh to the movie because I loved the book so much. And there are two aspects in particular of the book that we did not get in the movie. And I was just so hung up on the fact that we didn't get that I think I was just a bit too harsh with it because it is a fantastic adaptation. The performances are incredible. The cast is just amazing. And I know everything in a book can't fit in a movie. And so I feel like my critiques just were a bit unfair of that film. So I do want to say that I do like it more now as time has passed. And I think it's a fantastic adaptation. But to move on to the book review, because I do want to talk about the book real quick yet again and just how much I love it. I read it twice earlier for my book versus movie episode I did at the start of the year. And then I read it once more in preparation for seeing the new film. And I loved it all 3 times. So the fact that I read it 3 times in 1 year, if that isn't enough of a recommendation, then I don't know what else to say. But I do want to say though that this book does have like very blunt descriptions of like sex and different body parts. And there are also like blunt descriptions of SA. Very early on too, we get a scene like this. And in general, there's just so many heavy, tough topics to read about in this book. And so I know that might cause a lot of people to not want to read it, but please do not let that deter you because I promise if you read this book all the way through, it is just a fantastic experience and such a beautiful story. And despite the heavy, difficult things, you just end the book just like full of so much love, like so much love for these characters. And it also inspires self-love. And it also just inspired me to just appreciate the world around me all the more. And so it is just such an uplifting, an empowering book and a beautiful story. And it is one of those life-changing books for me, right? Where it like impacted the way I see the world. It's one that will just stick with me forever. And there's just different sections we'll get into that were just so incredibly beautiful and powerful. And yeah, I absolutely love it. And you should read it. And then on to a spoiler-free movie review. I highly recommend you go see this movie in theaters. The performances are fantastic. It also looks great, like the cinematography and just how vibrant it is. And it's nearly 2.5 hours long, but the time flies by. I wear a watch and not once did I look at the time because I was just so immersed and captivated and engrossed in the story. And then also I do love musicals, so I am biased because I just loved the music and I loved the choreographed dance scenes and that was all just fantastic. And it is just such a powerful movie. And there were 2 scenes in particular we'll get to where I was in tears because the performances were just so emotional and incredible. And yeah, I would highly recommend this film. Even though it still deals with these heavy topics, there is something about this one that is like lighter. And I did watch an interview with Oprah Winfrey and she talks about this. She says how this version is like, I think she used the word joy, like there's more joy to this film than her version had because the original movie is heavier, which like the book is heavy too. So this one, out of all 3, this one feels the most buoyant and light, despite also covering these difficult scenes. And there are a few scenes that are just like so tough to watch. And also the music, maybe that makes it lighter. And then there's more funny parts as well. So I don't remember the original movie having much humor, but yeah, this one has a number of scenes that were definitely pretty funny. And I will say like, yeah, there were aspects of the book that I was missing and that I wished we had gotten more of here. Like I would have been happy if this had been a 3-hour film film, like no complaints from me. But since it is 2.5 hours, of course there was stuff that they didn't include, but for the most part, I kind of went into it knowing that, and so it didn't really bother me. But from here on out, I'm going to be getting into the details of the plot and what is different and why I love both, which means we will be getting into spoilers. So I'm going to begin with Celie and Shug, because a complaint I had with the original film was that we didn't see that Celie and Shug in the book, like they have a committed long-term romantic relationship, and we do not see that in the original movie. And I was hoping that was a change this movie would make, but they actually were more like the 80s movie where, yeah, we don't really see that they have this like long-term romantic relationship. We see them kiss and we see them wake up together, and we see, of course, over time, they still have like a friendship relationship and they still have a deep love for each other, but the romantic relationship didn't really come through as much. And that's fine, right? Like if you see this movie just on its for what it is, like that's still a great, beautiful story. But having read the book, I just really missed not getting to see them in an actual long-term relationship. And to get specific into like how things play out in both. So in the movie, Shug comes to stay with Celie and Albert, and she is there for quite a while. And this is when she sings at Harpo's juke joint. And during this time, she and Celie become very close. And this is also when they become intimate. But then eventually she ends up leaving because she is, a traveling singer. And so when she's getting ready to leave in the movie, Celie tells her like, don't leave. Like Albert, he beats me when you're not here, but when you're around, he's in a good mood and he doesn't hit me. And in the book, Celie tells Shug this. And so then Shug confronts Albert and she's like, hey, like you're hurting someone I love. And Albert stops hitting Celie after this. Whereas in the movie, Celie tells Shug that, but then Shug doesn't say anything to Albert. But yeah, during this stay is when they go to the movies and then they kiss, and then it seems they are intimate because they wake up together. And this is also when Shug helps Celie find the letters Nettie has been writing her. But then as far as the romantic aspect of the relationship goes, that's where it ends. But I will say this movie does have a beautiful musical number between Shug and Celie, and it's like this retro vintage Hollywood song, which I thought was really beautiful. And there's also the scene when she is helping Shug in the bath and it's like on the spinning record, which I thought was a great scene as well. So it's not like we don't see that she's in love with Shug and that Shug loves her too. But like I said, I just want to see an adaptation where we see their long-term relationship. Because yeah, in the book, Shug stays the first time around and she and Celie bond and become very close. But then Shug leaves and then she comes back later and she is married to a man named Grady. And Albert is jealous that she is married now because Albert is also in love with Shug. But then Albert and Grady get along great. And so while they're hanging out, Shug and Celie start spending time together. And this is when the two of them start their relationship. It's once Shug is already married. Whereas in the movie, she and Celie have this intimate moment. And then later when Shug comes back, she is now married. And so the fact that she got married after the fact kind of changed things, right? Whereas in the book, she was married to Grady, but then she ends up getting with Celie. And then also Grady, he was interested in Mary Agnes. So when Celie goes back with them in the book, Grady is now with Mary Agnes and Shug is now with Celie. And also in the book, when she is there with Grady, they're there for a long time. Whereas in the movie, she comes to visit with Grady and it seems like they're there for like a day. And we get the famous scene at the dinner table where they tell him like, hey, like Celie's coming back with us. She's leaving you, Albert, which is a fantastic scene in the book and the movie. But yeah, in the book, she and Grady were there for a long time. And yeah, she and Shug, they're together for a long time. They live in Memphis together. And she breaks Celie's heart when years down the road, she tells her that she has fallen for a guy in her band and he is much younger. She's like 60 at this point and this guy is 20. She feels horrible because she knows it's breaking Celie's heart, but she's like, please, like, I need this opportunity to feel young again and to run off with this guy. Like, I know it's hurting you and I'm so sorry and I still love you, but I gotta do this. And so she does, and she goes off with this man. And in the book, we read from Celie because obviously at the start, she is so hurt and heartbroken, but then seeing her evolve and how just because she loves Shug, it doesn't mean she can control Shug. Anyway, the book reads, sometimes I feel mad at her, feel like I could scratch her hair right off her head, but then I think Shug got a right to live too. She got a right to look over the world in whatever company she choose. Just because I love her, don't take away none of her rights. If she come, I'd be happy. If she don't, I'd be content. And then I figure this is the lesson I was supposed to learn. And yeah, that right there I just think is so beautiful, where she doesn't rely on Shug to be happy. By the end, she's like, you know what? Whether she comes back or not, I'll still be happy. That is also just such a beautiful message. But this young guy Shug is with, he encourages her to reach out to her children because she had like 3 children who her parents raised, and she she kind of acts like it's no big deal. But then this guy is like, you know what, like you should reach out to them. And so she does. And one of them wants to see her. And when she spends time with this son, it becomes like a very important experience for her because like her parents are dead at this point. So she's not able to reconcile with them because they disapproved of the life she lived. But being able to reconcile with her child, it does just help complete her, right? And she realized this part of herself that needed to be filled by this relationship. And so even though it's messed up, she leaves Celie, this did end up leading her to have a relationship with her child again. And eventually she does come back to Celie as well. Whereas in the movie, the relationship that Shug reconciles is the one with her father. So they have him be the town reverend, and none of this is in the book, but he's the reverend. And so he doesn't talk to her because he disapproves of her lifestyle. And in the movie, we see how she misses the relationship she'd had with him, but she's like, you know what, but there's nothing I can do. Like he doesn't approve of me and he doesn't want anything to do with me. And he just treats her as if she's, you know, some random lady, not his daughter. But then by the end of the movie, we see her like walk into the church and they sing a song together and they hug. Like I'm fine with this change because we do get this in the original movie as well. That's the story. And in and of itself, like that's fine. However, in this adaptation, I just wasn't feeling it as much. Like Taraji P Henson is fantastic. So I'm not complaining on her acting. Maybe we just needed to spend more time with it because yeah, that wasn't as powerful a scene as I wanted it to be. And then on to Celie and Albert. So Celie and Albert, aka Mr. This relationship is one of my favorite in the book. Like Celie and Shug I love, but Celie and Albert, the relationship arc they have is just so fantastic because at the start he is abusive and cruel. And then when she leaves for Memphis, we see in book and all movies how she tells him, like she curses him kind of, and she's like, what you have done to me is done to you. And then in the movie we see that like, yeah, his crops are ruined. He becomes a drunk and his life is falling apart. And so he promises that he is going to make things right by Celie because he was just so abusive and horrible to her. And in the book, this is the case too, because when Celie, she goes to Memphis, but she comes back to visit a number of times, like first when Sofia's mom dies, but then she finds out the man who she thought was her dad was not her biological father. In the book, Nettie is the one who tells her this. And so in the book, Celie goes to visit this man when he is still alive. And then she also comes back yet again when this man dies and he leaves her, you know, the house and the store and everything, which her biological father had owned. And yeah, when she is like back in town, Sofia tells her like, hey, like Albert has been changing. Like, you know, he actually works and the place is clean. And, you know, he went through a rough patch where he was drinking all the time. And there's also a part where she talks about how when Albert was struggling, Sofia one day went to the house and she saw that like Harpo had been there trying to help his father. And when she walked in, she found them like sleeping together and Harpo was like cradling Albert, which again was just like so sweet. And we do see this kind of in the movie where Albert is drinking and Harpo is kind of like getting him out of the juke joint and kind of, you know, holding him. And clearly he's just like, man, like my dad's falling apart. But anyway, I was talking about the book. So she hears that Albert is like changing and then he does come up and talk to her and he, you know, makes conversation, clearly like wanting things to be right with them again. And then once Shug leaves Celie, she and Albert start spending a lot of time together and they sew together because, you know, she has her pants and he starts talking to her being like, you know, like why pants? Like that's what men wear. And she tells him how that's all relative because she's like, you know, Nettie told me in Africa, everybody wears dresses, you know, robes, men and women alike. So it's all relative and saying one gender wears this and one gender wears that is just kind of silly. And then he tells her like, you know what, I used to love sewing, but as a boy, I was told that I couldn't do that because that was what girls do. So I stopped, but I loved it. And so they're just breaking down, you know, these gender norms. And so he begins sewing with her and they just form the most beautiful platonic friendship. And one thing they bond over is their love of Shug because they both had been in love with Shug Avery. And so one conversation they have, they're just being like, oh, like, what do you love most about her? Like, oh, what do you love most about her? And we read, he say he love her style. He say, to tell the truth, Shug act more manly than most men. I mean, she upright, honest, speak her mind, and the devil take the hindmost, he say. You know Shug will fight, he say, just like Sofia, just bound to live her life and be herself no matter what. Mister think all this stuff men do, but Harpo not like this, I tell him. You not like this. What Shug got is womanly, it seemed to me, especially since she and Sofia the ones got it. Sofia and Shug not like men, he say, but they not like women either. And then in regards to her orientation, he asks her like, you know what, because I think he asks to marry her again or something, but she tells him she's not interested. And he's like, is it me or is it just like all men? Like, what's the deal here? And she tells him how like she has never been attracted to men, and to her, like she just compares them to frogs. And then we read, then he says something that really surprised me because it's so thoughtful and common sense. When it come to what folks do together with their bodies, he say, anybody's guess is as good as mine. But when you talk about love, I don't have to guess. I have love and have been loved. And I thank God he let me gain understanding enough to know love can't be halted just because some people's moan and groan. It don't surprise me you love Shug Avery, he say. I have loved Shug Avery all my life. And then another great section reads, after all the evil he done, I know you wonder why I don't hate him. I don't hate him for two reasons. One, he loves Shug. And two, Shug used to love him. Plus, look like he trying to make something out of himself. I don't mean just that he works and he clean up after himself and he appreciates some of the things God was playful enough to make. I mean, when you talk to him now, he really listen. And one time out of nowhere in the conversation us was having, he say, Celie, I'm satisfied this is the first time I have ever lived on earth as a natural man. It feel like a new experience. And there's also a part where he says something about how it takes time to learn things, or like how you learn as you grow. And basically he says something about how like it took him until now to realize that Celie was great company. And there's also in the book, so Sofia and Harpo, they try to set Celie up with men because they're like, oh, two women being together, like that was just an accident, like you're meant to be with a man. But then when they put her on these setups, Albert will come by and be like, hey, this woman's my wife, and he takes her away. And so I just love that too, how like he doesn't try to convince her that she's wrong and that she needs to change and she needs to be with a man. Like he accepts her for who she is, and he also helps her get out of these situations. And just one small detail that I just love so much is when Shug comes back, Celie is like showing her around the house, and Albert has gotten into wood carving, and Shug sees a purple frog that has been carved out of wood, and she's like, oh, what's this? And Celie says that Albert made it for her. And so Celie loves the color purple, and so the fact that he carved her a purple frog was just such a sweet detail. But in the movie, so like I said, his life is falling apart and he's like, I need to make things right. And then it is at this time that he gets a letter saying that for Nettie and her family to come back to the States, they need documents to prove of their citizenship. And so he goes and he takes this letter and he goes to the department to make this happen, and he brings the documents. But then the guy says that like they also need like hundreds of dollars. And so Albert, he's like, you know, I have land. I could sell some of that. Like, would that help? And so not only does he like put in the effort of going to this department, US department, and giving the documents, but he also sells his land in order to get Nettie back. And then we get a later scene in the movie where he goes to Celie's pants store and he buys a pair of pants and he gets them off the clearance rack. And he's like, oh, I'll help you out by buying the ones, you know, other people don't want to buy. And they are this like shiny silver pair of pants. And she's like, are you sure you want these? But he also comes by and he brings a basket like full of her stuff that had been at his house. And this scene like was one of the scenes that made me cry. And it's partly because the scene itself I loved, but also as I was watching this, I was just thinking of the book relationship between the two of them and just how beautiful it is, how he changes. You know, what started out as such a horrible abusive relationship, she also like allows him to change and forgives him. And the two of them are able to have this amazing platonic love for each other. And so the fact that she doesn't hold it against him, you know, she allows him to change, right? Because so often when people do us wrong, we don't allow them to change and we keep them in our mind as the bad person they were. So just the beauty of just like both of these character developments over the course of the story and then just their relationship was just so sweet and so beautiful. And even though we don't quite get the full breadth of that in this movie, this scene I just really loved. And then we do see later on when he's at her Easter gathering and just like the way they talk to each other, like you can see that their relationship has been repaired. But to talk about Sofia, so in the movie, Sofia is with her second husband because she's with Harpo initially, but then he tries to beat her in order to get her to be submissive to him. And she's like, no, I'm not having that. So she leaves him. She's with a new guy and they are in town when the mayor's wife sees them. And she's like, oh, your kids are so clean. Like, how about you be my maid? And Sofia in the movie, she's initially being like, no, thanks. But the mayor's wife just keeps pushing it. So finally, Sofia is like, hell no, I don't want to be your maid. And this causes the mayor to slap Sofia, and Sofia like does not put up with any crap. And so she ends up hitting the mayor and this ends up getting her arrested. And in the movie, she is in jail for 6 years. And this again was just such a tough scene. And Celie goes to visit her and we see her when she's released after 6 years. And I guess that was her full sentence because then the mayor's wife is like, oh, she's going to work for me now as my maid while she gets back on her feet. And then we get the scene when Grady and Shug come to visit. They're having this meal. And when they tell Albert, like, oh, Celie's coming back with us, then Celie, you know, she gives it to Albert being like, you know, talking about how horrible he's been. And in the book, like his kids were horrible too. So she mentions that. But yeah, so she's like calling Albert out. And then this causes Sofia to laugh because of like the way Celie is insulting Albert is funny. And so in the movie, Sofia starts to laugh. And then her laugh turns into a cry. And then she talks to Celie and she like thanks her, being like, thank you so much for visiting me every week while I was in jail. And this was the other scene in the movie that made me cry because it was just such a powerful moment. But in the book, it's a bit different because so the whole thing happens with the mayor's wife and Sofia being put in jail. But then when Celie and all of them, when they visit her in jail, they're like, man, like she's gonna die in jail if she stays in there. And so they come up with the plan, like they're able to convince the judge or the sheriff to instead have Celie serve out her sentence being the maid for the mayor's wife. So she's not in jail for too long before she is moved to the mayor's house. So she ends up working for the mayor's family for like a big chunk of the story. It's like over a decade. But even though this is better than prison, she still goes years without seeing her family. So it's not like a job that she like goes to and then comes home. Like she lives at the mayor's house and they like never let her see her family. It's like years in between visits. And one of the mayor's daughters, you know, Sofia raises this daughter, and the daughter is like very attached to Sofia. And the daughter was kind to Sofia as a child. And so Sofia, she is kind to this daughter. And once the daughter becomes an adult, she is married and she has a son, and the son is named Reynolds Stanley. And she is visiting Sofia because, like I said, she cares about Sofia and likes having her in her life. So she is with her new baby, and she keeps trying to get Sofia to say that she loves him. She's like, oh, isn't he so cute? Don't you just love him? Isn't he just amazing? And she keeps pushing it. And so finally Sofia says like, no, I don't love him. And then she goes on to say, I got my own troubles, say Sofia, and when Reynolds Stanley grow up, he gonna be one of them. But he won't, say Miss Eleanor Jane. I'm his mama, and I won't let him be mean to colored. You in whose army, say Sofia. The first word he likely to speak won't be nothing he learned from you. You telling me I won't even be able to love my own son, say Miss Eleanor Jane. No, say Sofia, that's not what I'm telling you. I'm telling you that I won't be able to love your own son. You can love him just as much as you want to, but be ready to suffer the consequences. That's how the colored live. And this daughter is hurt, kind of realizing like, you know, she loves being around Sofia, but she's like, wow, like, does Sofia not like being around my family though? And for the first time, she goes back and she asks her mom, like, how did Sofia end up working for us? And she hears the story and she's like, wow, my parents suck. And so she ends up starting to like work for Sofia because Sofia has a daughter who is sick. And so Eleanor Jane, the mayor's daughter, will go and help Sofia. And her parents are just like, what? Who's ever heard of that? You know, a white woman, you know, working with a black lady? Like, that's ridiculous. But Eleanor Jane doesn't care, and she values Sofia and her relationship. And yeah, anyway, I just thought that was a really great arc as well to the story that we didn't get in any of the movies. But yeah, with Sofia, like what happens to her in all versions, like I feel like that's like the hardest part of this story for me, because obviously Celie goes through a lot of abuse, which is really difficult, but Celie's character arc is just like always going steadily up, whereas Sofia, she starts out like so incredible and so powerful, and like, you know, she doesn't put up with anything from anybody, and she just has such a presence, and she's just amazing. And so then to see her spirits be broken down, it was so sad and so hard to read about, and it's also hard to see in these films too. It's very difficult to watch, and so I feel like her story is just like the saddest one. And even though it ends well, like she's no longer working for the mayor, it has like a positive ending. But just that middle section with Sofia, like that's like one of the hardest parts. But another thing I had a complaint with in regards to the original movie is Nettie. We get so much of Nettie in the book, and she is a fantastic character. She is just as well developed as everybody else, and I absolutely loved her story. And we don't get it in like either of these movies. We see her when she is growing up with Celie, which again, in the original movie, I said they spent too much time with that. Whereas this movie, I had no complaints. When we were in their childhood years, I loved it and I didn't think it went on too long. But yeah, I just really wish we got more of Nettie as an adult. But again, this would need to be a mini series for us to really get into the details of what happens with her in Africa, and with Celie's children, Olivia and Adam, and with the couple, the Reverend and his wife, who they go with. Like, there's so much that happens in the book that we don't get in any of the movies. So I still have that complaint with this movie. Like I said, this could have been a 3-hour movie and they could have delved more into Nettie's time, and I would have loved it. But then I had a section, I was going to reshare different quotes I have from the book where it talks about God and the beauty God creates for us, which is a huge theme of this book. I talk about this in my previous video, so I do go more into it there. But real quick, I just want to reshare a couple quotes that I love from the book. So there is a conversation between Shug and Celie where Shug is saying, listen, God loved everything you love and a mess of stuff you don't. But more than anything else, God loved admiration. You saying God vain, I ask? No, she say, not vain, just wanting to share a good thing. I think it pisses God off if you walk by the color purple in a field somewhere and don't notice it. What it do when it's pissed off, I ask. Oh, it makes something else. People think pleasing God is all God care about, but any fool living in the world can see it always trying to please us back. And we do get this conversation in the movie as well, but I felt like they didn't really delve into these themes as much as they could have. Specifically, like, I feel like this could have been a song. Like Shug, I was expecting her to sing a song about this. And through this musical number, she could have really just like gotten into these themes from the book. So I was kind of disappointed that they didn't turn that into a musical number. And then Nettie, she also talks about this because when they're with the Olinka, like their god kind of is Roof Leaf. And then obviously she is there as a missionary where their god is, Jesus. But then in a letter to Celie, Nettie writes, God is different to us now after all these years in Africa. More spirit than ever before and more internal. Most people think he has to look like something or someone, a roof leaf or Christ. But we don't, and not being tied to what God looks like frees us. And there's also a great quote by Alice Walker where she talks about this idea of the evolution of your faith going from God being like, like what Nettie just said, like looking like something specific versus to then just seeing God as nature and God as everything that is around you. That's just a beautiful quote. But I share it in my original video, like I said. But something else that I did not share in my original video that I want to hear is the last paragraph of the book is just so amazing and I love it. It reads, I feel a little peculiar around the children. For one thing, they've grown, and I see they think me and Nettie and Shug and Albert and Samuel and Harpo and Sofia and Jack and Odessa real old and don't know much what going on. But I don't think us feel old at all. And us be so happy, matter of fact, I think this is the youngest us ever felt. And this is referenced in the final song of the movie. And again, I just love this theme as well. Like this idea of being like past your prime, right? Like older people can feel this way, but younger people will be like, oh, I'm 20, like this is my prime, the prime of life. And after this, it's all downhill. When that's so not true, right? Like a lot of these characters, they are living their best life when they are like in their 40s or older, right? And also like how the key to living a life that brings you the most joy and happiness is living a life where you are being yourself, right? And you're doing something where you feel fulfilled and you're at peace with who you are and your actions and your relationships. That is like the key to staying young, is to feeling young, right? It's just being filled with so much joy and peace and having so much appreciation for everybody and everything. And so I think that's something that you just gain with age, right? And so feeling young is something that is so relative because we think of the youth as being like full of life, but you can be like full of life and have that vibrant feeling inside of you even when you're older. And it's actually not about age at all. And yeah, that was just, again, a beautiful theme that I absolutely loved. But when it comes to book versus movie, so as far as the two adaptations go, I do think I prefer the musical over the older Spielberg adaptation. That is a fantastic adaptation and it's a great movie, but overall I've had a more emotional experience with this one. But I feel like that's unfair because I went into this one knowing there would be a lot of elements from the book that would not be in the film, so I just kind of knew that. And then I also love musicals, so I'm biased as far as that goes. And then I also saw this in theaters, which the theater experience is so much more powerful, so I'm saying I prefer it over the original movie, but the original movie, I went into it wanting as much of the book to be in it as possible, and I also watched it at home, and there was no music. I mean, actually, Shug does sing in the original, but anyway, I prefer the new movie, but I'm also biased for multiple reasons, even as I say that. But then when it comes to the book is better than both adaptations, I gotta say. Like, it's just incredible for all the reasons I have talked about. And I love these movies, and this musical version, I will be seeing it again in theaters, and it's one I will be watching many times. Like I said, it's not as heavy, and I did absolutely love it, but ultimately the book wins because it's just perfect, and I just love it so, so much. So yes, thank you for watching this video. Comment your thoughts down below. Let me know what you thought of this new version, how you like it compared to the book. What is your favorite aspect of the book? Or your favorite character? There are just so many incredible characters. So let me know down below what is like one of your favorite things about this book, and let me know what you think of the 80s movie as well. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will also link to The Color Purple here on the screen as well, so you can easily click on it. And yeah, I will see you next time. Bye.